Vincent Civillo. It's going to be his speech aid is using visual aids effectively. Vincent Civillo.
So the purpose of speech aid is to get comfortable with visual aids. And I use visual aids at work all the time in presentations. How many people use visual aids at work? Some of us. So some of us do. So tonight, I'm going to talk to you about why it's important to use visual aids. I'm also going to give you some good and bad examples. And I'm also going to give you some tips to more effectively use them into your presentations. Okay, I'd like everybody to take a look at this slide for a second. I'll give everybody a chance to read it. I actually pulled this off the Department of Labor website. You can see that we increase retention by using visual means. In other words, you can see that 65% of our retention is through visual and oral, where only 35% is visual alone. And really, the spoken presentation with no visual aids, you really only have a retention of about 10%. So you can see how important it is to use visual aids if you really want your audience to retain something after they leave you. A couple other studies have been done. One of the other studies psychologists have done, if you took a group of people and after 3 days after a presentation, they retained 6 times more information if a speech at a presentation was done with visual and spoken word as opposed to spoken word only. And the educators have found that 83% of human learning comes through visual means. We all hear the cliche that we're visual creatures, and that's how we learn. So using visual aids, you can see how important it is in order to get your audience not only to get the message, but to retain it after you leave them. And that's what we're here for. You know, whether you're doing a sales presentation, doing a fundraiser or whatever, you're trying to get people to retain that message long after they left you. Okay, I want you to take a look at this slide too, and it segues into my next part. You can see how simple it is. You want to keep it simple. Visual aids need to be brief and simple. Now I'm going to show you some examples from actual presentations that have come, that I pulled off the web, and I want you to compare it. Bill Gates here himself looks confused. Here's a slide. I mean, look at the amount of information on that slide. I think it has something to do with cloud computing. I think we can do that, but there's just too much information. You want to make the slide have short points on it or one message so you don't confuse your audience. This is my favorite, though, I pulled off. It's from Community Enlightenment. I'd like to see if anybody can tell me what that slide is. I mean, you cannot, you confuse the audience with too much information. There's a section, and I'll go back, there's a section that's below this that I filled out with all kinds of information. It's called notes. And you can use that effectively. But your slide needs to be extremely brief. It needs to be either bullet points, graphic, and just one message. Don't confuse your audience. Let the visual aids support your message. Don't let the visual aids drive your message. So let's talk about some tips. I told you it contains one message. Do not read the visual aids. Use a short visual aid and then give supporting information. That's where the notes come in. If you need to have notes, put it in the body. You can put as much as you want. Don't have your audience read and listen at the same time. This also goes into giving out handouts. I'm going to give you some tips at the end I printed out so that you can retain them. But I like to give them out at the end of the presentation so people aren't trying to do both. And let your audience read a slide. You go to a conference, a lot of times people will jump right in and people are trying to read at the same time. Give your audience some time to read. It's more effective. This is one of the more effective ones that I've learned to use, is use local photographs and examples. Politicians learn this, I was listening to Paul Ryan, and he's a white guy from the Midwest, and by the time you're done in Florida, you think he was a senior citizen because he identifies with his crowd. If you can use a local example, you can connect with the audience. And like doing a presentation at Duke Energy with my company, if I come in with my company and I can use local examples, and I can even use a slide that has a Duke Energy building on it, it immediately connects me with my audience to say, hey, you know, this person really cared about this presentation. He really took the time out of it. This isn't a cookie cutter presentation. So local examples are, use graphs if possible, a lot more powerful. We're visual creatures, like I said. Here's another important one. Do not use for persuasive statements or emotional appeals. That can be your message. Have your visual aid support that, but you do not want to put on your visual aid any emotional appeal. And I can't overemphasize this enough. Practice, practice, practice. We've all been there where you see a presentation and it doesn't go very well. The projector's not working. The visual aids don't go. And you know, you can be as prepared as you want as far as being able to speak, but what do the people remember? They remember that you know, your visual aids weren't working, you weren't very effective, and that's what they leave with. So, what did we talk about tonight? The importance of using visual aids. We talked about why it's important. We see that for retention of information, it's essential. I mean, you have to use them to get your point and message across to your audience, and more importantly, as we said, help them retain it. I gave you some examples of good and bad. The key to this, be brief. Make the visual, write your presentation. Have the visual aids support your presentation. Do not use visual aids to drive your presentation. And I've given you some tips. And I've got a handout with some of these tips on it that I'll pass out and that you can retain. And you can use this if you're making help you with visual aids, whether you're doing a Toastmasters speech like I'm doing tonight, at work, whatever you're doing, sales presentations, or wherever you find yourself speaking. Mr. Toastmaster.